Yo, how's it going guys? My name's Liffy and this is my guide to Shadow Priest PvE in BFA patch 8.3. There's going to be a fair bit of info to take in with this one, so this is a bit of a general guide for those people that are a little bit new to Shadow or for those who have been struggling to get as much DPS out of their class as they should be able to, so let's jump into it. What we'll do is we'll break it down into a few different sections. So we've got essences, Azerite, general gear, stat priority sort of thing, consumables, enchants, the corrupted pieces, and talents and rotation. And then we'll have a quick little word about weakuras and stuff right at the end. First off, we'll jump into the essences. So the essence system's still quite annoying to work around, but with the Echoes Annihilator dropping for any character from Heroic Visions, Mythic Plus and your weekly cache, getting the essences you need are much faster for alts, or if you've got a character that's got a rank 3 already, you can buy those from Mother with these Echoes Annihilator. Failing that, you'll still have to go and do a little bit of PvP for one of the main essences and an old raid for some of them. For Shadow, we've got two main setups for on the raider. This is the first one. You've got Memory of Lucid Dreams as your major, Breath of the Dying, Blood of the Enemy, and Essence of the Focusing Iris as your minors. This is for anything with more than one target. This is the general setup for 9 out of 12 bosses in Nihilothar currently. It's really strong. As soon as you start adding more adds into a fight, this just becomes much more valuable, and especially with the way our stats scale, Memory of Lucid Dreams extends your void forms and is just fantastic as a major. So this is the other main setup that we use when raiding. This is pure single target setup. So you've got CLF, Condensed Life Force, Focusing Iris as your minor, Breath of the Dying minor, and Lucid minor as well. And this build I use for Mythic Plus. We use Mean Beam as our major, so Focusing Iris, Blood of the Enemy, Breath of the Dying, and Lucid again. Some people decide to use a Purification Protocol instead of one of the others, so Lucid or Blood, because it does some AoE. Personally, I prefer to keep it with this setup. The next thing we'll talk about is the Azerite traits. Shadow is fairly fixed when it comes to traits due to how well they're synergizing with other traits and the talent trait. Major traits that you'll be looking for are Chorus of Insanity, Spiteful Apparitions, and Whispers of the Damned. Chorus of Insanity is a stack and crit buff which builds the longer your void form lasts and decays over time. Spiteful Apparition ghosts do a hell of a lot of that damage on single target, but on multi-target fights they're insane. And Whispers of the Damned, having the option to get a chunk of Insanity when Shadow Void crits is a no-brainer. The extra damage is nice, but it's all about that extra chunk of Insanity on the crit. Without the trait, it feels slow to get into forms. Traits to note: Overwhelming Power. It's still good to have. It's a stacking haste buff. Unfortunately, not as good as it used to be, but still good. Heed My Call, nice little bit of AoE. And Elemental Well increases your secondary, so haste, crit, mastery, burst. When you get the haste and the crit roll rounds, really, really nice. So in the raid, the Azerite you want to be aiming for, if you can, be the Helmet from Resolve. The 5 item level really carries this third wing being in there. The shoulders from Carapace, really good choices because you've got Whisper, Spiteful and Chorus. The inner ring's not great, but the extra item level carries that. The chest from Raden, it's not bad. It's got Whispers, Chorus, and Elemental Whirl on it. If you don't manage to get the shoulders from Carapace, then you could always get the ones from Vexiona. They're still really good because they've got Chorus and Whispers on there and Heed My Call. But if you've been really unlucky, the best thing to do is go to the resident vendor and roll for a chest first and shoulders second. You're more likely to get a good pair of shoulders from the raid than you are from the vendor, because you'll be missing that Whisper slot otherwise. And whilst we're on the topic of Azerite, I just wanted to touch on something I've seen discussed on the Shadow Priest Discord quite often, is that Heart of Darkness is outsimming Spiteful Apparitions. Whilst that is accurate on one target, it doesn't outsim Spiteful Apparitions on multi-target fights, which in most cases, everything is a multi-target fight bar Shadhar. And even in that eventuality, because you're running so many traits of Spiteful and Chorus, you just get so much more value out of the Spiteful trait than you ever would out of Heart of Darkness. So for Shadow, Heart of Darkness isn't great. For Disc, yeah, but not for Shadow. So let's talk about gearing and stat priority. When it comes to gearing, the best thing to do, like every other person these days, is to head straight to a third-party site like Raidbots and sim your character. We do have a simple enough stat priority which doesn't change too much, so let's go over that now. For pure single target fights like Shatar or Rathian, haste is priority, so your stats would go haste, crit, mastery, versatility, intellect. For anything more than one target, so majority of fights, most content, crit becomes stronger and stronger because of your traits, making the priority crit, haste, mastery, verse, int. The ideal way to have your stats is fairly balanced, with slightly higher crit than haste, because most content's never exclusively just one mob, leaning more so on crit as you head into Mythic Plus or fights like Raden, Zanesh, anything with more than one target. Like I say, Shatar, Rathian, they're better for haste, but a good balance is always good to find. The best thing to do is to sim your character. When it comes down to trinkets, your best options are Psych Shredder from Skitra, Vita Charge Titan Shard from Raden, the Claw from Mount, a Rathian trinket, if nothing better. And when it comes to dungeons, they're not all that great, to be honest. A Compendium of Storms from the Auction House or your Inscription Friend still pulls ahead of most dungeon trinkets and most raid trinkets, depending on its item level, or if they've got a socket on it. So the best way to check? Do a sim. As you'll have probably gathered, we're in for a lot of crit and haste, so when it comes down to your gems and enchants, these are what you go for as well. You go for the quick sand spinner when you need haste gems, deadly lava lazuli when you need crit gems, and the accord of haste or crit enchants for your rings, deadly navigation or quick navigation for your weapons. A few people suggest using Machinist Brilliance for your weapon enchant because it has a chance to increase crit or haste, but it's a bit of a trap, to be honest. It's not worth using, and deadly or quick outperform it by quite a lot. When it comes down to sorting out what gems and enchants you need, the best thing to do is to go to raid bots and sim your character, get the SimC add-on, or just do a quick sim off the Armory APL. For your consumables, you'll be wanting to grab some baked pork potatoes for single target, bit of haste food, or McDowell's Big Mech crit food for multi-targets. There is a discussion at the moment about superior intel pots and focus resolve potions having their place. Personally, I feel like Unbridled Fury fills the quota perfectly well in every situation, but if you wanted to go a bit more into things, run some superior intel pots for AoE and some resolve pots for single target. Flask-wise, we're a caster, so we'll be using the greater flasks of Endless Talents. Now, let's get on to the interesting part, the corrupted pieces. So they're a bit of a pain in the arse at the minute because they're untargetable in a regular fashion. There is a couple of guaranteed sources, so you should make sure you're doing those. You've got your horrific vision runs, so a 5 mask will drop 470, a 4 mask 465, a 3 mask 460 going downward like that. Bear in mind at a 3 mask you can get Azerite pieces from the 460 chest.
Or from the weekly PvP and Mythic Plus cache.
So Shadow's pretty lucky in that our best corruption items are low value, meaning we can fit quite a few combinations in and experiment when we get some pieces. So the first one that we've got is Severe. This increases the amount of crit gained from all sources by 6, 9 and 12%. That ranges from 10 to 20 corruption. Expedient increases the amount of haste gained from all sources by 6, 9 and 12%, which again is between 10 and 20 corruption. Gushing Wounds, spells and abilities have a chance to make the target ooze blood over 7 seconds. This is really strong, especially in single target, but as soon as you start adding targets to the fight, it's nowhere near as good as things like Severe or Expedient, but it is useful to have one if you've got one. Void Ritual, this increases all secondary stats by 20, 33 or 63 for 20 seconds depending on rank. It's pretty decent, it ranges up to 66 corruption. Infinite Stars, spells and abilities have a chance to cool down Infinite Stars. This is obviously really good, especially if you put it into a sim for patchwork. This will show as the best corruption. Bear in mind that in the real world it's not going to get the same kind of value or uptime. It's going to splash ads that are on fights and not necessarily the targets you want. On certain fights like Mythic Carapace, you don't want the tumors being hit on the way up into the second room, and for that reason you wouldn't run stars there because it just splashes whatever target you're in combat with technically. It is really handy to have for single target fights, but not for multi-target. It does lose a fair bit of value. Twisted Appendage. This has a chance to summon Mind Flay Tentacles. It scales off of crit and verse, not haste, so bear that in mind. It is a pretty decent corruption, but there are better ones for us, but worth using if you've got one. Racing Pulse is a haste proc. This is pretty decent and worth using over other things like the Tentacle or Void Ritual if you've got those options. If you've got one, you may as well be using it. Deadly Momentum is a stacking crit buff. It's a bit underwhelming at the minute. If it was buffed a bit, then it'd be worth using, but it's alright if you've got nothing better for the time being. Just a quick note on the corrupted pieces. I've seen it discussed fairly regularly on our Discord. I don't know whether I'm getting the wrong end of the stick, but I just thought I'd put it out there anyway. People seem to think that if you're replacing an Infinite Stars piece, for example, a rank 3 with 75 corruption with other pieces that you have, then you somehow have to work yourself back up to the same corruption value you were at when you had stars equipped. That's not necessarily true, because that just changes the affix that you have to deal with, so the Eye of Corruption or Barry from Beyond chasing you about. That changes gameplay, not DPS output. And Shadow's pretty fortunate in that its best corruptions are low value ones, so Severe and Expedient are just so much better. We gain such value from the secondary stats. It's definitely worth taking those over anything else. As you can see here, this is my setup for Carapace, just to use that as an example. I've dropped down to 33 corruption instead for this one. Running 2 Severe and 2 Deadly Momentum pieces, they still perform really well, and not having stars means that we don't have the tumours triggered inside unnecessarily, and it just makes everything a fair bit easier. So you can still perform well if you don't have stars equipped. Don't let that guide you into thinking it's best because the sim says so. Try it with 3 targets and you'll see. So let's get in and take a look at the talents and the rotation. Our talent choices are fairly fixed at the minute, and generally only 2 rows of change when you're doing different content in PvE. So at 15, our go-to is Shadow Word Void. Fortress of the Mind will sim higher, but in practice it's much more punishing having to hold that charge, or not being able to Mind Blast because you've got move. Whereas Shadow Word Void gives you 2 charges, meaning you can cast one, have one on cooldown, and then deal with movement and mechanics and not be as affected. Shadow Insight's good, but it's not useful in PvE. Level 30, it's a bit of utility. Generally speaking, Body and Soul's your go-to for everything. We're not the most mobile class, and without Body and Soul, we're practically purple snails. 40% move speed for 4 seconds is super useful. Sand Lane can be useful on fights where you don't need to move much, but the healers could, use a bit of a hand at point. Intangibility, again, isn't used often, but it is fantastic when you need a big damage reduction more often. Cheesy mechanics like Ilganoth's Silence and Gaze, for example. You can disperse that and leave it all in one spot rather than spreading it around the room. It's super useful, especially in Mythic. Level 45 row is the first one that becomes a bit interchangeable. Twist of Fate's fantastic single target, quite a lot of multi-target scenarios. It's your general go-to as a flat 10% damage increase. Misery is a talent that you'd swap Twist for. Misery applies both dots in one GCD, but only generates a 6 insanity for casting VT. The talent is fantastic on quite a few fights in Mythic, and really good in Mythic Plus. Dark Void's in the same spot. It's been in for Raiden for a while. Super niche, not all that useful. If you really want to pad on fights like Hivemind, go for it, but that's pretty much its only use. When you do Mythic Pluses, you're better off taking Misery with a Pug Tank as well, solely because you don't know how they're going to pull and whether it's going to be useful for you. At 60, you get a bit more utility and comes down what you need more of. Mind Bomb's discounted straight away. It's very few uses and just isn't taken. Last Word's fantastic for lowering Silence's cooldown, which is our interrupt from 45 seconds down to 30. So think Shrine of the Storm, second boss for example, needs a shit ton of interrupts, and miss kicks can become a wipe real quick. Psychic Horror is a single target stun. It's great when your interrupts on cooldown if you need to stop a cast. Stun Barry from Beyond when he starts chasing you. If you cast it on the thing from Beyond within the first couple of seconds of spawning, by the time the stun wears off, you've got about a second or 2 before the ad despawns. So generally speaking, you're pretty safe from it if you need it for that. At 75, you find yourself looking at a mandatory pick. Previously, Shadow Crash was taken because of a hidden buff to Auspicious Spirits, which meant that they did 75% more damage when the talent wasn't taken. Now that buff got removed as a bug fix, so Shadow Crush isn't competitive anymore. The instant insanity is handy and might see a little use in Mythic Plus, but not often. Shadow Word Death is just that, dead. Has been all expansion, so nope. Auspicious Spirits is the go-to here. The interaction between this talent and our traits is just a must-have. It's fantastic. At 90, like 75 is a no-choice row. Void Torrent was cool in Legion, but hasn't had a place in BFA at all, really. Not in PvE anyway. Mindbender's decent, but Lingering Insanity is hands down the best here. If you don't have it, falling out of void form's horrible, feels super slow. You may have haste stacks, chorus stacks, but with no haste it's so slow getting back into form, and it carries into your next void form, just means more and more damage. And finally, at level 100 we have loads of choice. Nah, who am I kidding? Surrender's been trash since Legion, and Dark Ascension hasn't found its place either just yet. So Legacy of the Void's the only choice here. It means you can enter Void form at 60 Insanity instead of 100. This in turn means you get into forms much faster, and when you have a Whisper of the Damned trait, a critically hitting Shadow Word Void will give you 35 Insanity, meaning it's even faster to get back into your forms. Shadow's rotation isn't built around complexity, it's built around consistency. The main way to improve your DPS is by practicing, learning how to keep void forms rolling for longer, because as Shadow we don't really do burst. We're all about putting out a high average amount of DPS. This means longer the fight, longer the form, higher DPS in theory. You just have to be consistent. So rotation wise, let's jump into that. Generally you'll start with no sanity at a boss, so we'll go into that assumption first, and also say you don't have Whispers crit on the first cast, because it can happen. You want to open like this, so your potion on 3, start casting on 1, Shadow Word Pain into that Void, Void again into Vampiric Touch, into 2 Mind Flays because I've got no crits. Oh, Eyeball. Oh, Void Erupt, let's get rid of Barry quickly. So Void Erupt into that Bolt straight away, then Mind Blast, then Void Bolt, then Mind Flay, then Void Bolt, then Mind Flay, then Void Bolt, then Shadow Word Void, then Void Bolt. And if you look in the bottom right at the rotation, it's just being consistent, making sure there's 2 global cooldowns in between each Void Bolt. That's it. Shadow Word Fiend a bit late there. All that eye tick stacking up. We're going to Lucid. Nah, we'll save it. We're getting some good procs on Lucid here. So pop it now. Oh, Barry's coming. Just take it to the face. Oof. Pot so I don't die doing this. Yeah, anyway, that's the basic rotation. If you're lucky enough to be able to pull some Insanity before a boss and you don't have to reset, you can Mind Seer an ally to keep it from decaying. This is how you'd pre-erupt. You'd pre-pot on 3, erupt on 2, travel time, Void Bolt spam, and then Shadow Word Void into a Pain, then spam Void Bolt, and then Vampiric Touch into a Void, and then Void Bolt, and then Mind Flay, and then Void Bolt, and then back into the normal rotation of keeping 2 global cooldowns in between your Void Bolts. As Shadow, we don't really have many major cooldowns apart from the Essence and Shadow Fiend, so I'll touch on the Essences in a minute, but when it comes to Shadow Fiend, the first thing you need to think about is the best time to get him out, and that's around 19 stacks. Depending on your gear, if you're quite low geared, between 17 and 19 stacks is a good point, and if you're quite well geared, anything between 20 and 25 stacks is a good point. Just find the GCD where you're not interrupting your rotation enough, you're keeping that 2 GCD gap. So those are the openers you'll find yourself using, but how do you get the most out of the Essences? A lot of that depends a lot on the length of the fight and how the damage phases are laid out. So Nihilator is an example. First 3 bosses you generally use CLF Major, Breath Iris and Lucid Miners, and then for bosses 4 to 12 you usually use Lucid Major, Breath Iris and Blood of the Enemy. Condensed Life Force, Fire and Forget Essence really, and it's best used as early as possible in a Void form, but always about 5 seconds before Shadow Fiend. Fiend benefits from the haste gain of CLF, so you want to pop CLF at about 15 stacks, Shadow Fiend at around 20 stacks, and then on cooldown. Memory Lucid Dreams is a bit more intricate in that there's more time for using it, and using it later on in the cycle is more beneficial because the major power makes it generate 100% more Insanity, and the minor has a chance to refund 50% of the Insanity spent. Running Lucid, you want to wait until you're struggling to stay above 50 sanity. Generally it's around 25 to 30 stacks without Lust, and between 31 and 35 with Lust. Sometimes it'll vary because you might get lucky with Whispers procs or a Lucid refund. And a quick word on weakuras and add-ons. Ideally, you want an Insanity bar add-on. Twin Tops is a go-to as a standalone add-on. Personally, I'm using Public's weakura instead. Nameplates that show dot timers or a weakura that displays these is really handy. Weakuras is just a really useful tool to have in general. been a bit of a long one, guys, I know, but thought I'd make a little guide to help out some of the people with some of the questions I see quite often on the Priest Discord. If you've got any questions or things you want to know that I haven't touched on, drop a comment below, hit me up on Discord. If you'd like links to weakuras or add-ons I use, and if you want to see a Mythic Plus guide or visions or something like that, let me know. If you like this guide, found it useful at all, like, subscribe, check out the other videos. We've got boss kills, dungeons, and even some music I'm working on. Alright, peace. Have a good day.